and I lit the lighter. And I don't think that he thought I was going to light the lighter. I instantly tasted the gasoline, the burning flesh, my hair burning, took one last breath, and covered my eyes and crouched down and yelled out, "Put me out!" By the time we got back to Alaska, this was still in Alaska and still part of the family and always around at family functions. Within weeks of me being back in Alaska, was also putting himself in my space again. Family, community events. I remember telling my children when we moved to Alaska, never be alone in the room with him. I don't care. Don't get in a car with him. Just don't go anywhere with him. Within weeks, he was already making me uncomfortable back in Alaska. And I didn't have anybody to protect me now. I often would surround myself with other people that would allow me to relieve my pain or do whatever I wanted, like hold my hand to make bad decisions. And I often would tell them that this person was in my life. And so I would feel protected by whoever I was with. Just be in the places where, normal places where, or hotels that we would get. This would carry on for the next 3 years in Alaska too. I would continue to struggle, and the summer of 2019, I was living on our family allotment in remote Alaska. I had been in and out of outpatient treatment. My family was helping me to get custody of my child back. That same summer, this cousin moved back to the property not far from where I was living. And so now we're in remote Alaska with really nobody around. And he would often come down to my trailer and ask me for things or see if I needed a ride. I told my uncles and our tribal chief that I didn't want him on my property. I didn't want him to be down my driveway. And then I would go ask him for a ride. I would go put myself into his area and ask him for a ride. So then my family are like, okay, well, you said you didn't want to be around him. Then you go ask him for a ride and you guys are doing it together. So it was really conflicting. I wasn't keeping my own boundaries. And so I had been using with this person that had abused me as a child and riding around in his car with him. And he was with me at places getting before my fire. And so it was really confusing for everybody what happened the day of my fire. And I had called different friends and family members and told them that I was with him and my car had broke down. And these are just pieced together memories from right before the fire, the days before. And the day of the fire, I'm laying in my camper that I believe I sent pictures, and this camper that nobody should be living in. One of the doors was just a piece of plywood, and the wind would blow through the camper. There you could see the sky through the ceiling. You could see the ground through the floor. It's not something anybody should be living in, and that's where I was sleeping, or trying to get some sleep after this days of using before. And so I had relapsed. I was beating myself up about all of the things that I had been doing. I was beating myself up about how am I going to face my family? How am I going to face my treatment counselor? How am I going to explain my dirty UA? How am I going to get out of this hole? And then he knocked on the window of my camper. And when I seen him, I snapped. Instantly enraged me. And I got up, stormed out the camper door. And the first thing I saw when I came out the camper was my chainsaw gas sitting on the ground. And I picked it up and I started pouring it on myself, and I was screaming at him, and I lit the lighter. And I don't think that he thought I was going to light the lighter. And I instantly tasted the gasoline, the burning flesh, my hair burning, took one last breath and covered my eyes and crouched down and yelled out, "Put me out!" And we were in remote Alaska without cell phone service, without running water, without electricity. I had put also a 18-gallon plastic tote outside my door, and it was full of dirty laundry, and it had been rained on. It was the only water we had. And he poured it on me had smothered out the fire. And I don't really remember getting in the car, but they put me in the car and took me a quarter of a mile down the road to my uncle's where there was a phone, and they called EMS. And they life-flighted me from my driveway. They put me into a coma right there in the driveway when they got there. So once I was stabilized in Anchorage, they put me on another flight to Seattle at the Harborview burn unit there. Some of the best burn surgeons in the nation. I was incoherent. They didn't know who I was when I came into the ER because I was unrecognizable, already intubated. I do believe my family ended up having to identify me by the tattoo on my foot, because everything but my feet and my groin were burned. I sustained 80% total body area burn, full and partial thickness burns to 80% of my body. I was given 5% chance to survive my injuries. They did not expect me to live. I've had 30 surgeries. I've had lots of blood transfusions, lots of physical therapy. I had to learn how to walk, talk, eat, bathe, dress. I would spend 5 months in the Harborview burn unit in the ICU and 3 months in a coma. For the first 6 weeks, my doctor said that he thought that every night, that night was going to be the night that the nurse called and said I had passed. I was very touch and go for the first at least 6 weeks, but I was in a coma for 3 months. My organs were failing. My first memory of being awake and just in so much pain, I was angry at myself, ashamed. I felt like a failure. My family did not want to believe that I would do this to myself. I hadn't really seen my face yet, and I was angry because I could only imagine. And you think the worst. You think, who are the people I have seen who are burned? Freddy Krueger, the Phantom of the Opera, like Two-Face. And so I was angry, very angry, and the type of angry that you can't even. I was just so mad. I was at a teaching hospital, and thankfully those burn nurses and surgeons are a rare breed of people, because through all my hatefulness, they still continue to treat me with the utmost respect, compassion, and dignity. Help me any way they could. They still continue to treat me with the utmost respect, compassion, and dignity. By the time I was 9 years old, one of my cousins had been using me. He would take advantage of the times that my mom had been up for too long and finally crashed and was sleeping really hard. And then he would take those moments to prey upon me. When he continued to do that for 3 years, and when it all came out that he had been me, my mom had a hard time accepting it. As a child, she would always tell us what goes on in our house stays in our house. And I happened to talk about with a friend of mine. I was young, and a friend of mine also was by this person, and so we were just confiding in each other as children who had been through something similar with the same person. That friend of mine ended up telling the school nurse that this was going on in my house, which then Child Protective Services and the police got involved. Well, in the course of the investigation for my mom got in trouble for an illegal that was found. It was almost like I betrayed my family by talking about what was going on in our house with people outside our home. By the time I was 13, I no longer lived at home because my mom and I couldn't get along. I was also acting out and not emotionally regulated at all. I was a hormonal 13-year-old angry child. So I had a very tumultuous childhood. By the time I was 15, I was pregnant with my first child. I got pregnant by a man that was 5 years older than me. This man that I got pregnant by was the first person that made me feel safe from this, and actually admitted what he did to me, to my children's father, and I saved my from him once. He started to become before I had our child. He would use and sell. It was like I was repeating the cycle unknowingly with my unborn child. And so he would become, and he would cheat on me, and I would still felt like he was still the most stable place that I could be. He's just helped me have a more stable environment, helped me to pay the bills in our house. He was a good dad, but he still was doing illegal activities as well and not following the rules, and just not somebody I wanted as a role model for my children. I knew that early on, but I felt like I was kind of stuck because I had nowhere else to go. By the time I got pregnant with my second child, we were separated, and he actually was never in my second child's life because we were so to each other, and it was just not a good environment for any of us to be in. My children would grow up without a father. I was introduced in the tumultuous environment with my mother as a child. Was my first introduction to hard. My mother had given it to the person that I used the with. I was 13 and the other person was 16, and we were children smoking it in my home bathroom. I smoked for the first time at 13 years old, and that was right before my mom would kick me out of the house for good. I felt very abandoned by my family for most of my life, and so that was the first introduction into hard in my life. By the time my oldest son was 5 years old, we had lived in 5 states. But when he started kindergarten, I vowed that I did not want to bounce him around like I had bounced him around already. After my children's father and I separated the last time, we both went to jail for fighting. When I was pregnant with my youngest son, though, this is where my addiction started. While I was pregnant with my younger son, I was given a prescription of, and I would be given that prescription for the last 3 months of my pregnancy. I started taking 5 milligram Podone before bed, and by the time I was done with my pregnancy, I had developed an addiction to it. I didn't really realize that happened, and then I had no more prescription. And then I had other friends that got and had indicated that they would sell them to me, and so I started just buying them from friends that would sell them to me, and I would continue that addiction for 10 years, slowly building up my tolerance as the 10 years progressed. So from 2004 to 2014, I would start with 1 milligram, and at the end of my addiction, I was taking 10 milligram at a time, and I was taking them probably every 3 days. It was still maintaining I was still going to work, I was still going to school, taking care of my kids, and so in my mind, I had it under control. Even though from the outside, I did not have it under control. I continued to struggle with my use, using, and eventually graduating to smoking and regularly, and I would lose custody of my younger son. What I would say to somebody else who may be stuck or struggling, do not be afraid to reach out to community. Do not be afraid to tell your closest friend, hey, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And just be like, I just need you to listen to what I'm dealing with. Sometimes we don't always have the answers, but knowing that somebody's there and willing to sit with us in the darkness is more powerful than you could ever imagine.